have been mandated by the East African community to champion development of coherent regional renewable energy policy for the East African region. And yes, this involves interaction, consultations with the stakeholders. And the private sector is playing and will continue playing significant roles in increasing access to clean energy in the region. So as the government, as the region develop policies, we want the private sector to be involved in every stage of the development. So we are now in the process trying to mobilize resources to develop coherent regional policy. So this dialogue is a starting point will provide inputs into that regional policy that we are developing.
The policies in the energy done by governments in East African community are not just in paper, but at least experts of the industry are openly discussing the issues related on how do we transit from the low levels of access to electricity in the region to achieve universal access. And of course, using the abundance of sunshine in the region, how do we tap into that and be able to work with the private sector to develop the renewable energy projects in hydro, in solar. And so we're looking at the best platform that this dialogue in Kigali could address most of the challenges that we see the energy sector is facing.
During the EAC Public Dialogue, stakeholders and experts in the energy industry from across the region are discussing issues and ways related on how to achieve a universal energy access by 2030 according to the SDG Goal 7, affordable and clean energy.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is since we are operating in, we have the East African Customs Union and common market, the two pillars, one of the two of the pillars of the East African community integration process already in place. We have free movements of goods and services, including in the energy sector. We agree on common external tariffs, including energy products. So it is very important that our policies, laws, and regulations are harmonized. Because if you're operating because anyone investing in this market will be investing in the same market. So when you invest in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Tanzania, should have the same regulations in place.
Energy in general requires resources to develop big projects in generation, governments or utilities investing into transmission systems, distribution networks. At the end, putting the milestone, the wire to every household. And the challenge that we face in Africa for the past decades was political stability, but also the changes that we've seen in the few years is that now Africa is no longer Africa that we used to hear about. The young generation that we see, the investments that we see from young entrepreneurs going into rural areas, having innovative ways of connecting households with solar home systems, with mini-grids, reaching out every household, is an indication that it's no longer a continent that everyone is going to mention that is Africa, but is an Africa that is progressing rapidly. If you see what is happening in the region, in other parts of the continent.
The government of Rwanda has been working hand in hand with the private sector in order to achieve 100% energy access across the country by 2024. In 10 years, Rwanda has managed to go from 10% to 15% electricity coverage to over 50% across the country.
Rwanda in 2000, we had access to electricity below, I would say, 1%. 2010, just after 10 years, we are around 9%. And this is where now the policies began being revised, and of course with the good leadership that we have in this country of His Excellency Paul Kagame, is that the Ministry of Infrastructure with the implementing agents, of course, have been focusing on a good policy, but at the same time also having projects that are implemented in collaboration with donor community, but working with the beneficiaries, because at the end you need to get feedback from the rural community. And this is how we have seen the transition of the low access level from 2010 quadrupling to now 51%, 38% grid connected, and around 13% using solar home systems. And this pace have been achieved because of the enabling environment that the country has provided to private sector. And this is what we see, that given that strong leadership and with an enabling environment, why not achieving universal access in the next 5 years? The infrastructure is there, the commitment is there. Second, of course, the resources are available because the government mobilizes resources to implement projects.
The private sector is taking lead today in terms of renewable access to energy, but mostly into renewables, where we have the private sector that is using a mixed kind of technology in renewables. So we have energy coming from small rivers, such as mini hydros, that end up becoming either mini grids or feeding into the grid. And then we also have solar home systems and solar mini grids. All these technologies are operated by the private sector, and the private sector has been given a leeway or an opportunity to be able to work with the government through the National Electrification Plan, which gives 48% of the off-grid connections to the private sector and 52% on-grid connections to both the private sector and the government. Off-grid normally has been full of private sector, and for us as an organization, as the energy private developers, we are in place to make sure that all the energy companies in the country that are doing private business are well taken care of in terms of policies, in terms of regulations, in terms of massive advocacy, be it access to finance, be it access to the rural areas, be it anything that they would need to be advocated for to them.